It was a miracle, there is no other word for it. He couldn't possibly explain what happened, but he opened his eyes again. Judging from the experiences of the past few days, he had obviously turned into a child. Not fully understanding the language, he believed that the word, Dad, probably referred to Vater, meaning Papa in German. Yet he had no way to confirm this. He could hardly believe he was at a stage where he couldn't talk yet, as his vocal cords were not properly developed. He didn't understand much of what his mother was saying either, but the sound of her voice calling to him was more beautiful than any string instrument he could remember. These two had received great grace, and he truly appreciated his new parents. Perhaps it was because he had been born again that he could hear once more. He had always thought he would trade his soul for the chance to hear again, to listen with both ears and compose music with his own hands. That was his lifelong dream. Now, as the realization set in, he felt as though he might cry. A shudder ran through his body. Seeing him shiver, his parents gently put him down and began changing his diaper. Though embarrassed, he began squirming. His mother calmed him, reassuring him with, "You're a good boy, so stay calm." When she was done, she commented that he must feel refreshed. Yet he still couldn't believe he was being humiliated like this. As a 60-year-old man trapped in a child's body, the sound of a boiling kettle reached his mother, so she told her husband to turn off the gas. She also requested that he play some music, mentioning that it was good for babies' emotions. When the music began, the baby stopped crying, quickly recognizing the song as Piano Sonata No. 11K. 331 by Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgang Gottlieb Mozart, also known as Amadeus. Mozart had been an unprecedented genius, and his music was so beautiful that it filled the room, giving him goosebumps. His parents seemed refined, and he even wondered if they might have a pianist of such caliber in their residence. Perhaps he had been born into an aristocratic family. He thanked God for this opportunity. His parents, observing his calmness, attributed it to the recent diaper change. Listening to the beautiful melody, his small body quickly became drowsy. His father informed his wife that he must leave for work, mentioning they needed to prepare a room for Dobin when he grew up. However, to do so, they first had to become financially stable. Dobin didn't fully understand what his parents were discussing, but he sensed a sweet, caring tone between them, a culture of a family that loved each other. To him, who had regained his hearing, there was nothing more to ask for. His parents hoped he would grow up to be as nice and healthy as he seemed now. After a while, he was able to control his body to some extent. Looking around, however, he found it odd that for an aristocratic house with a live-in musician, his room was too small and sparsely furnished. Perhaps it was just his room, though, as his parents stayed close by. He decided to go on a mission to look for the musicians. He even checked the fridge, thinking they might be hiding there. His mother, noticing him, asked what trouble he was up to. He tried to explain that he was just trying to find the musician, but his babbling came out as unintelligible gibberish. His mother, busy, told him to sit tight and promised to play some songs for him. She placed a radio in front of him, and as she pressed a button, music began to play. Dobin was stunned. This was a type of music he had never heard before. It was incredibly beautiful, a perfectly tuned melody that danced like a butterfly. As his mother walked away, smiling to herself, another woman asked her a question, and she quickly turned to answer. Meanwhile, Dobin remained entranced, unable to believe such a song could exist. It was perfect. When the song ended, he grew frustrated, wanting to hear more. In his frustration, he began hitting the radio repeatedly. Strange noises came from it, and he wondered if the magic box was upset with him. Determined, he hit the box again, and to his amazement, The beautiful music began playing once more. Dobin marveled at the flawless music, wondering about the musician behind it. Could it have been Karl Czerny, the Austrian pianist, teacher, and composer born in 1791 and known as a disciple of Beethoven and teacher of Franz Liszt? Dobin began to feel nostalgic. Perhaps this musician was a lifelong friend who had pursued musical perfection. He began shaking the box, urging his friend to come out. Eventually, the box opened, revealing a cassette tape, and he began unraveling it, curiously questioning its purpose. But soon, he found himself tangled in the tape, thinking he was about to die. Before succumbing, he tried to cry out for his mother, hoping she could save him. Just then, he saw a disturbing sight: a woman with a diamond ring pointing at his mother, whose hands appeared worn out from hard work. Later, his mother entered the room and asked if he was playing well, but Dobin sat there with a solemn expression. By the time he was 8 months old, he had earned a reputation as a cute troublemaker. Over time, he came to see this strange black box as a mysterious treasure trove of songs and musicians that delighted his ears and soul. Pressing a button on this device made music flow like a river. He mused on the exquisite and magnificent waves of notes that lifted his spirits. Upon hearing the cassette, he initially thought he had been born into an aristocratic family. But that was hardly the case. Nonetheless, he was grateful to be alive and able to hear beautiful music again. One day, his mother arrived, announcing that it was a special day. She dressed him up in some borrowed clothes and wished him a happy birthday. Many people were introduced to the cute baby Dobin. They noticed how calm he was and marveled at his pretty eyes. Yet some wondered why he wasn't more expressive. They speculated on whether he had spoken, yet as time passed, Dobin grew increasingly depressed. He understood his parents' words to some extent, and he felt he could speak, but he refused to do so out of a deep dislike for poverty. Music had defined his past life, with constant concerns about money. Now that he had been born again, regained his hearing, and found caring parents, he questioned what he should do next. Should he make music for money again? He shook his head, determined to avoid repeating that cycle. This time, he vowed to create the music he genuinely wanted to make, regardless of money. As a sign of his resolve, he raised his hand in the air, endearing himself to onlookers who cooed at how cute he looked. His mother then placed a bunch of toys and money in front of him, encouraging him to pick one. Intrigued, he spotted the money and, in awe, felt a strange attraction to it. It had a handsome man on it, and he found himself drawn to its charm. When his parents noticed him grabbing the money, they asked if that's what he chose. Smiling, he looked up and said, "Money is the best." These were his first words, leaving his mother disappointed. As he grew older, Dobin discovered that he had been reborn 180 years after his original life. Realizing that God must have a sense of humor, he gradually began to understand the world around him. Dobin's family lived with his uncle, and his mother assisted with the household chores. He observed the worn clothes she set aside and watched her stretch, feeling sympathy for her hard work. In an attempt to help, he grabbed some clothes and clumsily folded them. His mother thanked him, though she suggested he simply watch television. Suddenly Youngbin entered the room with his wife, aka a pillow. He's Dobin's cousin who's 14 years older. That was when Youngbin's mother arrived and commented that the groceries were heavy. She quickly tried to slap her son, but he dodged, telling her not to walk around like that. He asked where she was aiming because that was his afterimage. She grabbed his ears forcefully, and he declared that his ears would rip if she continued. He was a strange guy. Not long after, he took out some yogurt and gave one to Dobin. They both opened it at the same time and drank it down in one, no, 2, gulps. Together in unison they declared, It's tasty! At 3 years old, Dobin followed Yungbin well. Recently, he had started visiting Yungbin's room often. Yungbin spent most of his time in front of something called a computer, playing while watching this and that in his room. There were a lot of interesting things there, mostly interesting dolls. Yungbin told him not to touch anything without being careful and instead to play with a toy car. Dobin began playing with the car, but to his surprise, it turned into a robotic human. This reborn world was a strange place full of incomprehensible magical things. The transformation of the car was a new experience, and he thought it would be fun to express this interesting feeling with music. This led to a new musical idea. Unfortunately, even though he had a musical idea, he couldn't play it or listen to it. So, he decided to just go play with the car. Except for not being able to play music, even though he had regained his hearing, he was living a satisfying life. At that moment, Yungbin began mumbling something to himself, and Dobin realized he was in an even more serious condition than usual. But what could be making him so excited? He asked what Yungbin was doing. Yungbin asked if he wanted to listen to it, so he placed the earphones in Dobin's ears and asked if he thought it was a masterpiece. However, Dobin hated the song. It had a melody, but it was crude and didn't seem to consider harmony at all. It lacked the basics. Yungbin then declared that it was a song he wrote titled, "Cheer You Up with Yomi Yomi." In his baby voice, which could barely pronounce the words, Dobin inquired how Yungbin wrote music. Yungbin explained that he did it on the computer, using a program called Vocaloid. He demonstrated what to do and how to compose and listen to it. However, Dobin declared that he wanted to try it too. Yungbin told him it was still too hard for him, but Dobin persisted. Yungbin kept rejecting him, until Dobin insisted he should listen to someone older than him, but since he was older, Dobin asked him, just once. Yungbin still refused. That's when Yungbin's mother barged in and told him it was time for them to go. She grabbed him by the ear, saying they were late. Yungbin protested, saying it was because of Dobin, but his mother told him to hurry up. Dobin yawned and mumbled that he was sleepy and wanted to stay home. In the rush, they left the computer on. Dobin sat at the computer and muttered to himself, saying this was a skill of a veteran in life. He tried to remember what Yungbin had done earlier. He didn't fully understand, but he felt like he could get the gist of it. This was the momentous occasion of his first time composing since being reborn. Late at night, as stars filled the sky, he finally finished his masterpiece. However, as a result, his hands hurt. It took longer than he thought, being unfamiliar with the tool. This composition was a sonata, and he wanted to capture the heartbreak of a dying angel and the lovely voice of his mother when he was reborn. He titled it, Resurrection. It had been 200 years since he last heard his own composition, and he decided it was time to listen to his masterpiece. However, he took the earphones out and then put them back in, wondering what was wrong with this. Dobin's mother asked where Dobin was and if he had gone with Yungbin. Yungbin said no, and she thought he was out with him, as she hadn't seen him all day. Yungbin commented that Dobin had said he was sleeping earlier. That's when a horrible thought came to his mind, and he quickly ran past Dobin's mother. He opened the door, shocked to find Dobin holding the computer as if he were about to smash it. Yungbin's eyes widened in despair as he quickly grabbed the computer from Dobin, asking what he was doing. Yungbin told him he couldn't do this, that what he was doing was bad, but Dobin exclaimed that the computer was bad. Yungbin, confused, asked what he meant. Dobin explained he wanted to listen to a sound he heard earlier, and Yungbin asked why he hadn't just waited for him. Yungbin thought he really liked the song he made, so Yungbin offered to play it for him. As the song began playing, Dobin realized it was horrible. Youngbin didn't recognize it as his own song and asked Dobin what this was, only to see him crying. He asked why Dobin was crying, and Dobin exclaimed that the tone was wrong. Dobin regretted trying to use the computer, as he was still unfamiliar with it. He was really looking forward to hearing his composition, and nothing would make him happier than being able to hear his own music. But even though this miracle was right there, his limitations as a baby made him feel regretful. Maybe it was because he was too young, but an emotion he could have handled in the past was now bursting out as tears. Youngbin told him to stop crying, and Dobin, still whimpering, explained that he tried his best. Youngbin asked what the song was, as it was his first time hearing it, and Dobin revealed that he had made it. Upon hearing this, Youngbin couldn't believe it, wondering if Dobin was a genius. But before he could contemplate further, Dobin requested that he teach him how to use the computer. Youngbin hesitated, saying he didn't fully understand the app either, and besides, Dobin was a little young. Dobin, knowing it was an excuse, decided he'd tell his aunt, making Youngbin exclaim that Dobin was a child and didn't understand his mother yet. She would tell him to study instead of playing with computers. Dobin clarified that he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about Youngbin's doll collection. He threatened to tell her that he wanted Youngbin's doll, and Youngbin could only imagine his mother saying he was grown up, so he should give it to Dobin. Youngbin defensively blocked his dolls, asking if Dobin knew how rare they were, but Dobin replied that he didn't know, saying he was just a child. Reluctantly, Youngbin surrendered and declared he would teach him the basics. As expected of Youngbin, he was willing to help. Although he was a bit weird, he was still a good person who cared for his cousin. It had been a year since Dobin learned about Vocaloid from his cousin. At 4 years old, though, he didn't understand much of the language and couldn't use the computer properly. So, despite being able to compose, he was now focusing on learning simple words like butterfly and lion. Reading wasn't a problem after studying for a month, but writing had been a bigger challenge. Suddenly Youngbin announced that the song they posted had over 1 million views. Dobin, engrossed in reading, shushed him. Youngbin apologized, realizing Dobin was focused. Every time Youngbin made a fuss about views, Dobin didn't understand much of what he meant. 180 years before his rebirth, the world had been awash with new music, and listening to modern music was a bit different. Recently, he had been fascinated by Claude Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun, finding it groundbreaking. Suddenly, Youngbin received an email from Japan saying they wanted to sign a contract with Dobin. Dobin, uninterested, continued reading. Later, in the living room, Dobin's mother remarked that it had to be a scam. They had heard a song made by a little kid and contacted them from Japan, which sounded far-fetched. Youngbin assured her it wasn't a scam, declaring Dobin a genius. However, Dobin's parents were skeptical, watching him struggle to pronounce simple words like there and elephant. Dobin's mother laughs at how the Japanese company managed to know about Dobin and contacted them. However, Youngbin explains that he posted Dobin's song on the internet, and it got a lot of views. They must have seen that and reached out. Surprised, he questions why nobody believes him. Dobin frowns, thinking Youngbin is being spoiled and disrespectful, as if he needs a lesson. They comment that Dobin is still very young, only 4 years old. Youngbin then expresses his frustration, announcing that Dobin has made genuinely great songs. Since Youngbin's claim rings somewhat true, Dobin consider letting him off the hook, even though Dobin parents still seem unsure of what to do. Youngbin understands their suspicion. Signing a contract with a 4-year-old does indeed sound suspicious, even to him. However, when he sees that no one believes him, he decides to bring his computer over and asks them to listen to Dobin's song. He plays it for everyone, and as they listen, they are shocked. Dobin realizes this is the first time his parents are hearing one of his compositions. He wonders how they will react. Will they be surprised or happy? But something seems off in the atmosphere. His mom's expression is different, almost angry, which suddenly brings up a memory he'd rather forget. He starts to feel tangled in his thoughts, wondering if he has done something unnecessary. What if they, too, start to view him differently? What if they try to use him? But to his surprise, his mother hugs him, pinches his cheeks, and exclaims that she didn't know he could do something like this. She'd always assumed he was just playing games. He realizes that, more than being happy, she seems relieved. His father looks at him with a hint of regret, perhaps for not recognizing his son's talent earlier, as he was always busy working. Suddenly, his wife pats him on the back, telling him not to fill his head with unnecessary worries again. Dobin will be going to daycare soon, so he can start earning money again. He shouldn't worry so much. Dobin's mother encourages him to trust his parents and to do what he truly wants. She doesn't want Dobin to start working so young. He realizes that his parents are different from people who saw him merely as a source of income. They value things more important than money and experience. Now, he doesn't have to rush into signing a contract to protect his parents. In a few years, his name will be known, and he will be able to live comfortably by selling sheet music, as he did before. He's determined to make a lot of money as he grows up and give it to his mom and dad. When he tells his parents this, they're grateful and hug him. Deciding to go a bit slower, he doesn't want to worry them. Youngbin, however, comments that it's a waste since the down payment is 100 million. Dobin's eyes widen at the mention of 100 million. That's a lot of money. Immediately, he declares that he wants to do it, surprising his parents. They ask him why he changed his mind so suddenly, but he doesn't yet have the vocabulary to explain his reasons. All he can do is convey his earnest desire, so he sincerely declares that he likes 100 million. For a moment, there is silence. Then his uncle gets up and walks away. His aunt turns to Youngbin and tells him to take notes on his brother's behavior. Later, Dobin's uncle returns, bringing a piano that lights up Dobin's eyes. But it's just a children's piano. When you play it, animals sing and dance. He tries it, but quickly loses interest. A week later, they head into town to meet the officials for the contract. They don't see anyone around and wonder if they're early. Dobin suddenly has a question. Can his father speak Japanese? Youngbin assures him not to worry, as that's why he came along. Dobin then inquires if Youngbin himself can speak Japanese. To answer, Youngbin starts speaking Japanese. Dobin immediately feels as though he should have left him at home. Just then, the Japanese representatives arrive and ask if they are the people they're supposed to meet. Dobin and his father stare in surprise. Dobin pinches Youngbin on the shoulder, urging him to say something, but Youngbin, looking nervous, only manages a feeble hello in Japanese. Disappointed, Dobin tells him to go home. With that, Dobin's father confidently introduces himself in Japanese, declaring that it's nice to meet them. Youngbin mutters that his language skills are lacking in real-life situations. The interpreter introduces Nakamura from X-Tone. Nakamura looks at the young genius, but Dobin stares back with a piercing gaze. He whispers to Youngbin, asking if he understands Japanese. Youngbin replies that he does, as he's watched a lot of anime. Dobin tells him to let him know if they say anything suspicious. In Vienna, there were many publishers who tried to cheat him, so he learned to be cautious. As they chat, Nakamura offers Dobin some ice cream, which Dobin devours and feels sad when it's gone. Seeing this, Nakamura orders another, leading Dobin to think that maybe Nakamura isn't so bad after all. Dobin's father and Nakamura talk for a few minutes, using words that sound complex, but the atmosphere seems friendly. Everything seems to be going well, and they even compliment his music, so he begins to hope for that 100 million. Nakamura remarks that he was extremely impressed with Dobin's composition. He had thought it was the work of a seasoned professional who preferred to stay in the shadows. Dobin's father explains that he is only Dobin's guardian, not the composer. Nakamura is stunned, realizing that this young boy is the actual composer, calling it extraordinary. After hearing this, they are ready to sign the contract. However, Young Bin interjects, revealing that there may have been a misunderstanding and he was only here as an interpreter. Nakamura and the interpreter look at each other, confused, and realize the only one left to be the composer is Dobin. The atmosphere suddenly turns serious. Nakamura and the interpreter exchange hushed words, and Dobin's father remains silent, seemingly concerned that something might go wrong with the contract. Dobin grows nervous and asks Youngbin what's happening. Youngbin explains that they don't believe he composed the music. This response shocks Dobin. How could they doubt him? If it weren't for the 100 million, he would have walked out. But just then, his father declares that they won't sign the contract. Dobin is even more shocked, wondering why his father would refuse. For some reason, his father's words hold an unexpected weight, filling the room with an intense atmosphere. Dobin is amazed to see this side of his usually gentle father. Curious, Dobin asks Youngbin what his father said, and Youngbin explains that his father refused to sign the contract. Surprised, Dobin asks why. His father gently pats him on the head, saying that he believes it would be better to do this when Dobin is older and with people who trust him. His father has made up his mind, and Dobin can't bring himself to protest. But realizing that his 100 million is slipping away, he needs to find a way to prove himself. That's when he notices a notebook and pen on the table. He reaches out, and the interpreter, thinking Dobin is bored, hands him the items. Without hesitation, Dobin begins to write. This will be the best way to show them all.